Taking a look out towards the Boone area of Watauga County, we had some snow earlier this weekend, but we're going to start to see a chance for some freezing rain to come through. We've got a cold air damming set up here. That's where we have high pressure across the northeastern U.S. That clockwise flow brings the cold air across the Atlantic and then into the mid-Atlantic states there. Then it runs into the Appalachians. And since cold air is very shallow, it dives under the warm air. And so we can get an interesting profile with the temperature. So we've got the warm air over that cold air. If we have rain that falls through the warm air, initially it's going to be rain, but then you get to the freezing temperatures down below, and that's when we have freezing rain. And it looks like it's going to be confined mostly to the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, into the Alleghenies and the Ridge and Valley Mountains there across the mid-Atlantic states, and then on up towards the northeast as well. So we could see some a light glaze of ice across these areas. Taking a look through the forecast, temperatures hovering right around freezing there around the Boone area. We start to see some of the rain move in, and that turns into the freezing rain at the higher elevations. We could see some pretty decent rain totals across the Carolinas as well. But of course, freezing rain does come with its hazards. And for more details on that, I want to send things out to meteorologist Alana Cameron. Texola, Oklahoma, right there on I-40 at the Texas border. The snow has really come down. I was talking to my producer earlier when he was showing me this. Right when it had changed over from rain to snow, nothing was happening. And in the last 25, 30 minutes or so, we've seen that road begin to get covered with snow. The X marks the spot of where Texola is. 33 degrees as the current temperature showing up on Viper radar right now. Up towards Sayre, also at 33, Elk City 34. We're going to see those temperatures tack down just a little bit as that snow continues to fall. Of course, since it's above freezing, you're going to have that melting, so that actually pulls that heat out of the air and cools it when the snow begins to melt. So eventually the snow will stop melting, and whatever liquid is on the road is going to turn into ice potentially. So you've got to be very careful as you're driving along this corridor. Now, as we switch over to radar, it's showing up as rain presently. It looks like it's just the radar having some difficulty interpreting the snow. Sometimes the rain-snow mix line is difficult for the radar algorithm to transition or to properly represent what is going on in the atmosphere. So we know from the ground truth that a lot of this is snow, and it's probably some of the information that's coming in of just the temperatures warming up around the area that the algorithm is switching it over to rain. But I would bet that around the Altus area, you're likely seeing some snow right now. Let's take a look from the local radar site here and just take a look at a couple of different products. So what I'm doing, I'm looking at the correlation coefficient. Sometimes you'll hear us talk about this when we're looking at tornado debris. There's no tornado threat in Oklahoma today. But what we can see is the relative size of the hydrometeors, the raindrops, the sleet particles, the snowflakes, all of that. Wherever we look at area of transition zone, we usually see a dip in the correlation. We see that here around the Altus area. So we see very consistent shapes along the I-40 corridor, so that's very likely the snow. This is where we're looking at rain transitioning to snow across this area. So if we put it back to the national radar mosaic here, we see that area of bright coloring with that. So that's likely where we're seeing the snow beginning to melt into rain. So Frederick, you're likely looking at rain. Sayre, Hobart, you're likely looking at snow. So a little bit of radar meteorology for you there. On the broader picture, though, we've got this whole area of moisture across parts of North Texas, southern Oklahoma. All of that moisture is going to be transitioning into some snow as it moves farther north into the colder air. Looking farther north across the U.S., though, we have some pretty decent snowfall across parts of eastern Nebraska into far western Iowa, and then moving on up into parts of the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro. We've even got some snow around this area as well. So a little bit of a streamer of snow moving into the Omaha and Lincoln metros at the moment. So if you're driving east or west along I-80, or if you're driving up through the Minneapolis-St. Paul region, you want to be aware of some of those winter driving conditions that you'll likely encounter across the area. We're back now on Weather Nation, taking a look into Altus, Oklahoma, where earlier the snow was starting to come down. You can see the roads are pretty wet, but the grassy surfaces starting to accumulate. We've got the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma on the line. Vivek Mahale joining us now. Thank you so much for joining us today. Talk about this setup. It's our first big snowstorm for the Oklahoma City Metro. What are some things to keep in mind?
Yeah, thanks, Kit. So, the heaviest snowfall, we're expecting is generally, west and southwest of Oklahoma City. So if people are traveling, say, west on Interstate 40 or southwest on I-44, say, west going toward Elk City, Clinton, Chickasha, or toward Amarillo, be on alert because there's going to be dangerous travel as you head to the west because we're seeing some very heavy, wet snow. Even though ground temperatures are warm, the precipitation rates are high enough to compensate for that, heavy, wet snow that's coming down across the west.
And of course, as it's coming down in some of those heavier bands, that could start to accumulate on the roads. Even though the road surface might still be above freezing, if it comes down hard enough, we could see a sort of sloshy mess with that.
That's exactly right. Our ground temperatures right now are, in the upper 40s, low to mid 40s in some spots. And when we have these high enough precipitation rates, it doesn't matter what the ground temperature is. It's going to accumulate. Now, it may, melt at the bottom, so it'll kind of become a slushy, wet snow, but the rates are high enough. We've already seen, webcams off to the west, where we're already starting to see accumulation along I-40, near the Oklahoma-Texas border.
Sure, and this is, like I said, the first snowstorm for Oklahoma City. It's looking like it's not going to be exactly the heaviest amounts for the metro, but it is a bit on the early side for the season.
Yeah, a lot of times, we see our first snow maybe in December or January. It's kind of varies. Some seasons we don't see hardly any snow. In some years, like 2011 or 2021, we saw a lot of snow. So it kind of varies a lot here in Oklahoma. So for Oklahoma City, as you mentioned, we are right on that gradient where maybe the northeast side of Oklahoma City Metro doesn't see as much as the southwest side of the Oklahoma City Metro. Even so, there could be some good accumulations, especially on the southwest side.
Certainly. And earlier, you were gathering some extra data with another weather balloon launch. What were you finding with that?
So we've done several launches. We did one, earlier this morning at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. and then we did another one a couple hours later, and then we just did another one. And what we found is the temperature is continuing to cool from the top down as the precipitation comes through. We're seeing latent heat transfer from those hydrometeors, so we're seeing it cooling from the top down. So eventually, we have a mix of rain and sleet across central Oklahoma, but it should transition to snow as the column cools, and we also have a very strong wave, and ahead of that wave, we're seeing a lot of ascent, and ascent causes, rising motion and air to cool as well.
Certainly. Always a cool setup with these storm systems that come through. Vivek, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully everyone is safe with the storm today.
Thank you, Kit.